At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
"If you can't bear this family and heir, what's the point of keeping you my husband?" said his voice cold, as if discarding a broken object. The divorce papers were handed to me right in front of 22 guests. My husband smirked triumphantly. I didn't say a word until my best friend quietly approached and placed an envelope on the table. A few seconds later, the atmosphere in the room changed. The smile on his lips slowly froze and began to disappear. And in that moment, everything he had painstakingly built began to crumble. "Thank you for being here. It means everything. Let me know in the comments. Where are you joining me from today? I love hearing from you." A heads up, this story includes fictionalized details for educational purposes. Names and settings are coincidental, but the message I'm sharing, that's the part that matters. I met Donovan Sterling on a Tuesday in June at a charity gala I almost didn't attend. It was one of those humid Austin evenings where the heat clings to your skin even after the sun dips below the horizon. I'd spent the day elbow-deep in fabric swatches and paint samples at my studio, a cramped but beloved space on South Congress where I ran my interior design business. By 6 p.m., all I wanted was takeout and my couch. But Harper Quinn, my best friend since our University of Texas days, and now a family law attorney with a tendency to meddle, had other plans. "You're going," she'd said that morning over coffee, sliding a printed invitation across the table. "It's for the Children's Literacy Fund. You love kids, you love books, and you need to meet people who aren't contractors." I meet clients. Clients don't count. You need a life outside that studio. So there I was in a navy dress I'd owned for 3 years, nursing a glass of cheap Chardonnay in the ballroom of the Driscoll Hotel, surrounded by Austin's wealthiest. Harper had abandoned me 10 minutes into network. She was relentless like that, and I was contemplating a graceful exit when he appeared. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." I turned. The man beside me was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair just starting to silver at the temples, and the kind of easy confidence that comes from never doubting your place in a room. His suit was tailored, his smile disarming. "That obvious?" I said. "Only to someone who feels the same way." He extended a hand. "Donovan Sterling." "Adrian Walsh." His handshake was firm, warm. "So Adrian Walsh, what do you do when you're not pretending to enjoy charity galas?" I laughed despite myself. "I'm an interior designer. I own a studio on South Congress." "No kidding, I'm in commercial real estate development. I spent half my life trying to convince designers to make concrete and steel feel human." And just like that, we were talking. Not small talk, real conversation. About architecture and why Austin was losing its soul to gentrification about art, and whether beauty was subjective or universal, about the dream of building something that lasts. 2 hours passed like 20 minutes. When Harper finally found me, Donovan had already asked for my number. Our first date was a week later. He picked a rooftop restaurant overlooking Lady Bird Lake, the kind of place where the skyline glitters against the water, and you can almost forget you're landlocked. He asked about my work, really asked, leaning forward like every word mattered. I told him about a recent project, a historic home in Clarksville I'd restored, and he listened with the kind of attention I wasn't used to. "My family's company, Sterling Properties, is breaking ground on a mixed-use development downtown," he said over dessert. "I'd love your perspective. We want it to feel rooted, not like another glass tower." "You're seriously asking for a consult on a first date?" "I'm seriously interested in what you think." That's how it started. Over the next 8 months, Donovan became the center of my world in a way that should have scared me, but didn't. We drove to Santa Fe for a long weekend, wandering through galleries and talking until sunrise. We spent Thanksgiving in New Orleans, where he charmed my mother over beignets and promised to take care of me. He brought coffee to my studio on early mornings when I had deadlines, sitting quietly in the corner with his laptop so I wouldn't be alone. I designed the interiors for his Riverside project, my biggest contract to date, and he told everyone I was the best in Texas. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen. Not just as a designer or a daughter or a friend, but as someone worth choosing. Then 4 months in, he invited me to meet his parents. The Sterling estate sat in the hills of Westlake, one of those sprawling properties that announce old money before you even pull into the driveway. Warren Sterling answered the door himself, a tall, silver-haired man with Donovan's build and a handshake that felt like a test. His voice was deep measured, the kind that fills a room without effort. "Adrian, Donovan's told us about you. All good things, I hope. We'll see." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Celeste Sterling. Donovan's mother was elegant in the way of women who've never worked a day, but perfected the art of appearances. She greeted me with 2 air kisses and a sweeping assessment: my dress, my shoes, my lack of jewelry. "Adrian, darling, come in. We're so curious about you." Dinner was in a formal dining room that could have seated 20. It was just the 4 of us, and every silence felt like scrutiny. Warren asked about my background, where I grew up, what my parents did. When I mentioned my mother, Constance was a retired elementary school teacher, and my father had passed when I was 12, he nodded politely. "And your family's from—" "San Antonio originally." "I see." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. I could feel the judgment in the pause. Celeste was warmer on the surface, but no less pointed. "Donovan tells us you run your own business. How ambitious. Of course, family is so important, don't you think? Legacy, continuity, the things we build together." She said it 3 times in different ways throughout the meal, each iteration a little sharper. Donovan said almost nothing. When Warren asked about my education, Donovan refilled my water. When Celeste mentioned the kind of women who fit into a Sterling future, he squeezed my hand under the table. I wanted him to interrupt, to defend me, to tell them I was more than my background. He didn't. As we left, Celeste walked me to the door. "I do hope you understand, dear. This family values continuity. It's important to us that Donovan builds something lasting." I smiled. Of course. But her words sat heavy in my chest the whole drive back. "They'll warm up," Donovan said, sensing my silence. "They're just protective." I wanted to believe him. I told myself every family had quirks, that love was enough. 2 months later, in February, Donovan proposed. He brought me back to the Driscoll, to the same ballroom where we'd met. He'd rented it for the evening, just us, a string quartet, and a ring that must have cost more than I made in 6 months. He got down on one knee in the center of the empty dance floor and said, "You're the person I want to build a future with." I said yes. I thought I was saying yes to a partner, to a life we'd create together. I didn't know I was saying yes to a test I'd been designed to fail. I didn't know that love in the Sterling family came with terms and conditions I'd never been told. I didn't know that the man who'd listened to me talk about crown molding and color theory had already decided I was temporary. And I didn't know that saying yes would cost me everything I thought I was. Our wedding took place in February at the Sterling estate in Westlake Hills, one of those sprawling properties where wealth whispers instead of shouts. I should have known something was wrong when I walked into the bridal suite that morning and saw my dress hanging on the door altered. The lace sleeves I'd chosen, delicate vintage-inspired, the one detail I'd insisted on, were gone. In their place, clean, modern cap sleeves that Celeste had deemed more appropriate. She said the lace was too busy, the seamstress explained nervously when I asked. "Mrs. Sterling approved the changes last week." Last week, and no one had told me. Harper found me staring at the dress, my jaw tight. "Addie, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I forced a smile. "Just last-minute jitters." She didn't believe me. Harper had a lawyer's instinct for lies, but she also knew better than to push on my wedding day. Instead, she squeezed my hand and said, "You can still back out." I laughed like she was joking. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since Donovan proposed, and I stood here about to marry him. Celeste had insisted we didn't need months of planning. She'd handled everything. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer. I thought it was generous. Now, pulling on a dress that wasn't quite mine anymore, I wondered if it was something else. My mother arrived as I was pinning my veil. Constance Walsh had driven up from San Antonio that morning, wearing the navy dress she'd worn to every special occasion for the past decade. She looked small in the bridal suite, out of place among the marble and gold fixtures. "You look beautiful, baby," she said, kissing my cheek. Then quieter. "You sure about this?" "Mom, I'm sure." "Okay." She smoothed my veil, her hands gentle. Just remember you don't owe anyone anything, not even after you say, I do. I didn't understand what she meant, not then. The ceremony was held on the estate's back lawn under a vine-covered arbor that cost more than my first car. 150 guests filled the white chairs, business associates of Warren's Country Club, friends of Celeste's people, whose names I'd never heard. I'd asked to invite my college friends, the contractors I worked with, the couple who owned the coffee shop below my studio. Darling, this is a Sterling family event, Celeste had said when I brought it up. We need to ensure it's appropriate. In the end, I got 10 guests. My mother, Harper, and her date. A few cousins I hadn't seen in years. They sat clustered together on the bride's side, a small island in a sea of strangers. Donovan looked perfect at the altar. He always did. When I reached him, he smiled, warm, reassuring, and for a moment the unease lifted. This was the man who brought me coffee, who listened when I talked about color theory and crown molding, who'd promised to build a future with me. You're beautiful, he whispered as the officiant began. I wanted to believe that was enough. The reception was a blur of champagne and forced conversations with people who looked through me more than at me. Celeste orchestrated everything: when we cut the cake, when we danced, when we made our rounds. Donovan's hand stayed on my lower back the entire time, steering me from table to table like I might drift away. At one point, I found my mother sitting alone near the edge of the tent. She looked tired. You okay, Mom? I'm fine, baby. She glanced around at the crowd, at the ice sculptures and the string quartet and the 5-tiered cake. This is a lot. It's just one day. I know. She patted my hand. I just hope you don't lose yourself in all this. I kissed her forehead and moved on. I didn't have time to think about what she meant. Harper cornered me in the bridal suite while I was changing for the send-off. She shut the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. Addie, real talk. Why does his mom make every decision? She picked your dress. She picked the menu. She told you who you could invite. She was just trying to help. And where was Donovan? I hesitated. He trusts his mom. He wants everyone to be happy. Harper studied me for a long moment, the way she did when a witness gave a bad answer. Everyone except you. It's one day, I said again, quieter. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. I just didn't want to admit it. We honeymooned in Napa Valley. Donovan had booked a cottage at a vineyard estate, all exposed beams and vineyard views. It should have been perfect. We spent the first 2 days tasting wine and wandering through towns with names like Yountville and Calistoga. At night, we sat on the patio and talked about the future, the house we'd buy, the projects we'd work on, the life we'd build. Then Warren called. I need you to look over the Riverside contracts, he said, and Donovan's expression shifted. Not annoyed, focused. Now, it's time sensitive. Donovan glanced at me, apologetic. Just give me an hour. It wasn't an hour. It was 2, then 3. I sat on the patio alone, watching the sun set over the vines, listening to Donovan's voice drift through the window, calm, deferential, saying, "Yes, Dad," over and over. When he finally came to bed, I was pretending to sleep. It happened twice more that week. Each time Donovan apologized. Each time I said it was fine. By the time we flew back to Austin, I'd stopped saying anything at all. 2 months later, we had our first real fight. I'd kept my studio after the wedding. It was mine, the space I'd built from scratch where I met clients and sketched designs and felt like myself. But rent was expensive, and Donovan had started suggesting I didn't need it anymore. We just bought a house, he said one night over dinner. You could design from home, save on overhead. I like having a separate space. Why, we're married now. Shouldn't we be building something together? He said it gently, reasonably, like I was being stubborn for no reason. I struggled to explain. It's mine. I need something that's mine. And I'm not enough. The question landed like a trap. If I said yes, I was selfish. If I said no, I gave up the studio. I gave up the studio. We bought the house in Clarksville a week later, a craftsman bungalow with original hardwood floors and a sunroom I could convert into an office. It cost $1.2 million. Donovan put down $800,000 from his trust. I contributed $200,000, my savings, plus a loan secured against my business income. See, Donovan said as we signed the papers, both our names on the deed. This is ours. We're building something together. I wanted to feel reassured. Instead, I felt like I'd traded something irreplaceable for something I wasn't sure I wanted. That night, I stood in the empty sunroom of our new house and tried to picture myself working there. Tried to imagine clients walking through our home, tracking in dirt, commenting on our furniture. Tried to convince myself that marriage meant compromise. I told myself every marriage requires adjustments. I didn't know I was adjusting myself into someone I wouldn't recognize. The questions about children started before we'd even finished unpacking. We'd been in the Clarksville house for 2 weeks when Celeste called. I was standing in the living room surrounded by boxes trying to decide where to hang a painting I'd bought in Santa Fe when my phone rang. "Adrienne, darling, how's the house?" "It's coming together, slowly. I'm sure it'll be lovely once you're settled." A pause. "You know now that you two have a proper home, we can start thinking about the next chapter." I didn't need to ask what she meant. "We're still adjusting to married life." Of course, but you're not getting any younger, dear. The biological clock and all that." She said it lightly, like she was commenting on the weather. "When can we expect good news?" I looked at the boxes stacked around me at the home I was still trying to make feel like mine. "We're just enjoying being newlyweds right now." Well, don't wait too long." Another pause. "I've invited you both to Easter dinner next month. The whole family will be there." By the whole family, she meant Sterling Properties executives, country club friends, and distant cousins I'd never met. 15 people watching me cut ham and smile through interrogation. Easter fell on a warm April Sunday. The Sterling estate was decorated in pastels, pale pink roses, cream linens, eggs hidden in the garden for cousins' children who were already in middle school, but still expected to perform tradition. I wore a yellow dress Celeste had complimented, once hoping to avoid commentary. It didn't work. We were halfway through the meal when she did it. "So," Celeste said loud enough for the entire table to hear, "when can we expect an announcement?" Conversation stopped. 14 faces turned toward me. "An announcement." I tried to sound confused, buying time. "A baby, dear. You've been married, 2 months now?" She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "Surely you've been trying." My face burned. Donovan's hand found mine under the table, not reassuring, just there. He said nothing. "We're taking our time," I managed, enjoying being just the two of us. "The clock is ticking, sweetheart." Celeste's smile didn't waver. She turned to the woman beside her. "Young people today, they wait and wait. In my day, you didn't waste time." I wanted to stand up to tell her my body wasn't her business, that 2 months of marriage didn't entitle her to my reproductive schedule. Instead, I smiled and sipped my wine and felt Donovan's hand squeeze mine in what I told myself was solidarity, but felt more like a warning to stay quiet. After that, it became a pattern. Every family dinner, twice a month like clockwork, Celeste asked, sometimes subtle, "Any news?" Sometimes pointed, "Still no luck." Warren never asked directly, but I heard him once talking to Donovan in the study after dinner. "A man without an heir is a man without a legacy." Donovan's response was too quiet for me to hear. Celeste called on Wednesdays. "Just checking in," she'd say, then pivot to questions about my cycle, my health, whether I'd considered seeing someone about it. I started letting calls go to voicemail. In June, I found the photograph. I was unpacking a box Donovan had brought from storage family photos he wanted to display, though we still hadn't gotten around to hanging most of them. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a frame I didn't recognize. The woman in the photo was elegant, maybe 60, with silver hair swept into a chignon and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. She wore a pearl necklace and a smile that looked genuine, not performed. Something about her felt warm. Different from the Sterlings I knew. "Who's this?" I asked Donovan that evening, holding up the frame. He glanced over from his laptop. "That's my grandmother, Eleanor, my dad's mom. She's beautiful. I don't think you've mentioned her. She died in 2016, before we met." He turned back to his screen. "I didn't know her that well. She and my dad weren't close." "Why not?" "I don't know. Family stuff." His tone made it clear the conversation was over. I studied the photo a moment longer, then set it on the bookshelf. There was something about Eleanor's expression, a softness Warren had never shown. I wanted to ask more, but Donovan was already on a call and I had a client presentation to finish. 2 weeks later, Warren came to the house. It was the first time he'd visited, and I suspected it wasn't social. He walked through the rooms like he was conducting an inspection, commenting on the crown molding and the original hardwood, but not quite saying whether he approved. In the living room, he stopped in front of the bookshelf. His gaze landed on Eleanor's photo. "Where did you get this?" "It was in a box Donovan brought from storage." Warren picked up the frame, his expression unreadable. "My mother had unusual ideas about legacy. She didn't understand family responsibility." "What do you mean?" "Nothing you need to worry about." He set the photo down facing backward so Eleanor wasn't visible. "Some things are better left in the past." After he left, I turned the frame around. Eleanor's kind eyes looked back at me, and I wondered what she'd done to make her own son speak of her like that. But when I asked Donovan later, he shrugged. "Dad and Grandma never got along. I think she didn't approve of how he ran the business or something. Ancient history." I let it go. I had bigger problems. By September, 6 months had passed since the wedding, and I still wasn't pregnant. I hadn't thought much of it at first. We were busy, stressed, adjusting to married life. But the pressure from Donovan's family had burrowed under my skin. I started tracking my cycle on an app counting days, timing intimacy, like a science project. Every month when my period came, I felt like I'd failed a test I hadn't studied for. Donovan was stressed too, though he tried to hide it. He took more calls from Warren, stayed late at the office, came home distracted. One night in early October, he found me in the bathroom, staring at another negative pregnancy test. "Hey," he said gently, "it's okay." "Is it?" I threw the test in the trash. "Your family asks me every week. Your dad talks about legacies. Your mom calls to ask if I've seen a specialist. They're just eager. They're relentless." He sat on the edge of the tub, pulling me to stand between his knees. "Maybe we should see a doctor, just to make sure everything's okay. It's only been 6 months." "I know, but it might give us peace of mind, and it would get my parents off our backs." I looked at him, at the man I'd married, who I'd thought would shield me from this kind of pressure. He looked tired, worried, maybe even a little desperate. "Okay," I said. "We'll make an appointment." He kissed my forehead. "We'll figure this out together." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe we were a team solving a problem side by side. I made the appointment with Dr. Raymond Peterson, the OBGYN Warren had recommended the best in Austin. Donovan said, "I thought we were taking a step forward. I didn't know I was walking into a trap." Dr. Peterson's office smelled like lavender and lies. I didn't know about the lies yet. All I knew was the scent piped through a diffuser in the corner, meant to be calming, and the anxious knot in my stomach as I sat in the waiting room, Donovan's hand resting on my knee. The walls were painted a soft blue-gray, the kind of color I'd specify for a spa. Framed prints of serene landscapes hung between exam room doors, everything designed to make you feel like this was just routine. But nothing about this felt routine. "Mrs. Sterling." A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "We're ready for you." Donovan squeezed my hand. "You want me to come in?" I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. "Doctor." Raymond Peterson was exactly what you'd expect from a physician Warren Sterling recommended. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive watch. The kind of calm authority that made you believe he knew all the answers. His office overlooked downtown Austin glass and steel towers, glinting in the October sun. "Adrienne," he said, shaking my hand, "I understand you and Donovan have been trying to conceive." "For about 6 months," I said. "And you've had irregular cycles." I hesitated. My periods had always been a little unpredictable sometimes, 28 days, sometimes 35, but I'd never thought much of it. "Sometimes." "Let's take a look." The ultrasound was uncomfortable. Cold gel wand pressed against my lower abdomen while I stared at a screen full of gray shapes I couldn't interpret. "Doctor," Peterson murmured to the tech, pointing at something I couldn't see. "What is it?" I asked. "I'll explain everything once we have the full picture," he said. Professional, detached. After the ultrasound came blood work, 3 vials drawn from my arm, labeled and whisked away to a lab. Dr. Peterson promised results within a week. That week stretched like elastic. I threw myself into work sketching floor plans and mood boards for the Gerald Tucker project, but every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. Donovan was gentle, patient. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it," he kept saying. I wanted to believe him. The follow-up appointment was on a gray Thursday morning. We sat across from Dr. Peterson's desk, mahogany pristine, while he pulled up charts on his computer. "Adrienne, your ultrasound and blood work indicate polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS." He turned the screen toward me. I saw images of my ovaries, small, dark circles clustered along the edges like a string of pearls. It's a hormonal condition. Essentially, your ovaries are producing too many immature follicles, and your hormone levels, particularly androgens, are elevated. What does that mean? My voice sounded small. It means conceiving naturally will be more difficult, not impossible. He added quickly, glancing at Donovan, but it may take longer. You might need medical intervention, ovulation induction, possibly IVF down the line. Difficult, I repeated. How difficult? Every case is different. Some women with PCOS conceive within a year. Others need more help. He folded his hands. The good news is it's manageable. We'll start you on a prenatal vitamin regimen to prepare your body. Monitor your cycles. If you're not pregnant within another 6 months, we'll discuss next steps. Donovan's hand found mine. We'll do whatever's necessary. Dr. Peterson nodded approvingly. That's the right attitude. I sat there staring at the screen at those tiny dark circles that apparently explained everything. Why I wasn't pregnant yet. Why Celeste's questions felt like accusations. Why I'd started to feel like my body was failing some invisible test. Is there anything I did wrong? I heard myself ask. PCOS isn't caused by anything you did or didn't do, Dr. Peterson said. It's a medical condition. You didn't choose this. But it felt like a judgment anyway. I held it together until we reached the parking garage. Donovan had gone back inside to schedule a follow-up, and I sat alone in the passenger seat of his car, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. Then the tears came. I called my mother. "Baby, what's wrong?" Constance's voice was immediate, alarmed. "I can't have kids." I knew that wasn't exactly what the doctor said, but that's what it felt like. There's something wrong with me. "Adrienne Walsh, you listen to me." My mother's voice turned fierce. "Your worth is not in your womb. You hear me? You are not broken." The doctor said, "I don't care what the doctor said. You are more than this. You are brilliant and strong and whole no matter what some test says." I wanted to believe her. But when Donovan got back in the car and asked if I was okay, I just nodded and wiped my eyes. That night, I called Celeste to tell her. I don't know why, maybe I thought she'd be sympathetic. Maybe I wanted her to stop asking. "Oh," she said after I explained the diagnosis. There was a pause, a long exhale. "So that's it." Not "I'm sorry," not "how are you feeling?" Just confirmation that I was in fact the problem. Warren's reaction was worse. At Sunday dinner, a week later, Donovan mentioned it to his father quietly across the table while I was talking to a cousin. But I heard Warren's response. "Well," he said, cutting into his steak, "that explains it. Like I was a failed investment, a car that wouldn't start." I stopped going to family dinners after that. Donovan went alone, making excuses for me, headaches, work, deadlines. I didn't care what he told them. I couldn't sit at that table anymore, couldn't smile through their disappointment. Instead, I buried myself in work. The Gerald Tucker project was my refuge, a luxury condo tower downtown, 20 floors of floor-to-ceiling windows and clean lines. Gerald was in his mid-60s, a business partner of Donovan's at Sterling Properties, and one of the few people in that company who treated me like a professional instead of Donovan Sterling's defective wife. Our first design meeting was at the Sterling Properties conference room. Donovan sat in, even though Gerald had hired me, not him. When Gerald suggested incorporating more natural materials, wood accent stone, Donovan cut him off. "Gerald let me handle the creative side. You focus on the numbers." Gerald went quiet. I saw the irritation flicker across his face before he smoothed it away. He'd been in real estate for 40 years. Donovan had been in the business for 10. But Donovan was Warren's son, so Gerald swallowed whatever he wanted to say. I made a mental note to follow up with Gerald privately. His ideas were good. Better than Donovan's, honestly. A week after the diagnosis, Donovan started bringing me vitamins. Dr. Peterson said you should start taking these, he said one morning, handing me a small bottle of pills. Prenatal vitamins. They'll help prepare your body. The bottle was unmarked except for a prescription label, Adrian Sterling, take one daily. These are prescription. Dr. Peterson said the over-the-counter ones aren't strong enough. These are medical grade. I turned the bottle over in my hand. The pills inside looked ordinary, small, round, pale pink. Did he say how long I need to take them? Indefinitely. They'll help regulate your hormones. It made sense. I trusted Dr. Peterson. I trusted Donovan. Every morning I took one pill with breakfast. Donovan watched, smiled, kissed my forehead. We're going to get through this, he'd say. I took those pills like penance, like if I could just do this one thing, right? Maybe my body would stop failing me. I didn't know they were my prison. The next 2 years were a slow drowning. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about losing yourself, you don't notice until you're already gone. It started with small things. Dinners where I stopped offering opinions because Donovan would answer for me anyway. Adrienne thinks the new city council proposal is interesting, he'd say, though I'd never mentioned it. I learned to nod and smile. I stopped inviting friends to the house. Harper had visited once in early 2022, and Donovan spent the entire evening asking when she'd leave. I thought it was just us tonight, he said after she left, not angry, just disappointed. I didn't invite her again. Celeste started making wardrobe suggestions. Darling, that necklace is a bit much for brunch, don't you think? I took it off. By summer, I was dressing in the muted colors she preferred, grays, creams, nothing that drew attention. I looked at photos from my wedding and didn't recognize the woman in the yellow dress who'd once thought color was armor. Intimacy faded to a scheduled obligation. Once a month, maybe. Donovan was always tired, always stressed. It's work, he'd say, turning away. I told myself it was normal that marriage settled into routine. I didn't let myself think about how rarely he looked at me anymore. At family dinners, still twice a month, still suffocating, I became invisible. Celeste asked after my health the way you'd ask about a car that wouldn't start. Any progress, dear, progress. Like my body was a project with deliverables. I shook my head and the conversation moved on. One summer evening in 2022, Celeste mentioned a name I didn't recognize. Do you know Sienna Blake? She asked, cutting into her salmon. Such a lovely girl. I hear she's doing very well in Seattle. Tech consulting, I think. I don't think so, I said. Oh, she and Donovan were quite close once. Before you, of course. Celeste smiled. Ancient history. Donovan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I didn't ask. I didn't have the energy to care about his past when I was barely surviving his present. Harper finally confronted me that July. We met for coffee, a rare outing I'd had to negotiate with Donovan like I was asking for parole. She sat across from me at our usual cafe on South Congress and studied my face. When's the last time you said no to them? To who? The Sterlings, Donovan, any of them. I stirred my coffee, trying to remember. I don't know. Why? Because you used to have opinions. You used to argue with me about paint colors and tell clients when their ideas were terrible. Now you just agree with everything. That's not true. When's the last time you wore that turquoise bracelet I gave you? The one you used to wear every day. I looked down at my bare wrist. I couldn't remember putting the bracelet away, but it had been months since I'd seen it. Maybe longer. Addie, Harper's voice softened. You're disappearing. I wanted to argue to defend my marriage, to insist everything was fine, but I couldn't. Because sitting there trying to remember the last time I'd felt like myself, I came up empty. I didn't know it then, but years before we met, Donovan had made a choice that would define everything. It was summer 2018. He was 30, sitting in a Sterling Properties board meeting, half listening to quarterly reports, when Gerald Tucker's assistant mentioned his wife's pregnancy. Congratulations, Warren said. The man laughed uncomfortably. Bit of a surprise, actually. I had a vasectomy 4 years ago. Thought we were done. I thought those were permanent, someone said. So did I. Apparently they can reverse on their own. Recanalization, the doctor called it. 1 in 1,000 chance. He shook his head. Now we're starting over with a newborn at 45. Donovan felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd been thinking about a vasectomy for months. He didn't want children, didn't want the obligation, the loss of freedom. But if it could fail... 2 weeks later, he had the procedure done at a clinic in San Antonio, paid cash, told no one. Not Warren, not Celeste. Not the women he dated casually and discarded when they started hinting about futures. But the colleague's story haunted him. What if his reversed too? What if despite everything he ended up trapped with a child he never wanted? When he met me in 2020, when his parents pushed him toward marriage, when he calculated that I could serve a purpose without derailing his plans, he built in insurance. The vasectomy was already done. But just in case he'd give me birth control disguised as vitamins. Double protection. Total control. I swallowed those pills every morning believing they were helping my broken body prepare for a baby that would never come. By December 2022, I'd learned to make myself small. I took up less space, spoke less, wanted less. At a family dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom and overheard Warren and Donovan in the hallway. Perhaps it's time to reconsider options, Warren said quietly. I stood frozen behind the door. You mean, you've given it 2 years, no one could fault you. They were talking about divorce. I was failing so thoroughly that even Warren, who measured everything in legacies and appearances, thought I should be cut loose. I walked back to the table and finished my dinner. No one noticed I'd gone pale. The Sterling Properties annual gala in August 2023 was held at the Driscoll Hotel, the same place Donovan and I had met 3 years earlier. I wore a gray dress Celeste had approved. I smiled at investors whose names I'd stopped trying to remember. Donovan was across the ballroom with Warren and a cluster of developers. He didn't look at me once. Not when I arrived, not during cocktail hour, not during dinner. I sat at our table alone because he'd been pulled away for important conversations and felt like a piece of furniture someone had forgotten to rearrange. Halfway through the evening, I went to the bathroom. The lighting was harsh, unforgiving. I stood at the sink and looked at my reflection. A woman in a gray dress with tired eyes and shoulders that curved inward like she was trying to fold into herself. Her jewelry was minimal. Her hair was pulled back in the style Celeste preferred. She looked like every other Sterling wife in the ballroom, polished, pleasant, empty. I didn't recognize her. She wasn't the woman who'd opened a design studio at 24, who'd argued with contractors twice her age, who'd worn turquoise and laughed too loud. She wasn't anyone I knew. I touched the mirror, half expecting the reflection to do something different to prove she was someone else. But she moved when I moved. That stranger was me. I went back to the ballroom. Donovan still didn't notice. That night, driving home in silence, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd said something I actually meant. Couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked what I wanted. Couldn't remember who I'd been before I became Mrs. Sterling, before I became the disappointment, the problem, the wife who couldn't deliver. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. By fall, I was barely holding on. September arrived with its usual Texas heat, but I felt cold all the time. At night, I'd lie awake next to Donovan and wonder when I'd stopped being a person to him, when I'd become a problem to solve, a liability to manage. Celeste called on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my home office, the sunroom Donovan had promised would be perfect for work, though he resented every client meeting I held there, sketching elevations for a residential project, when my phone rang. "Adrienne, darling, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine." "You sound tired." A pause, the kind that always preceded a suggestion I couldn't refuse. "I've been thinking. Perhaps you should take a break from work for a while. Focus on your health. Stress can affect fertility, you know." My hand tightened on my pencil. Work was the only thing keeping me tethered to who I'd been, the only space where I made decisions where my opinion mattered, and she wanted me to give it up. "I'll think about it." "I'm only trying to help, dear. We all want the same thing." After she hung up, I sat staring at my half-finished sketch. I wanted to scream that my body wasn't their project, that I wasn't failing them, they were killing me. But I didn't. I just whispered to the empty room, "I'll think about it," and hated myself for it. A week later, I overheard Warren and Donovan in the hallway during Sunday dinner. I'd gone to get my phone from my coat and heard their voices through the study door. "Perhaps it's time to reconsider your options." "What do you mean?" Donovan's voice was quieter than his father's. "You know what I mean. You've given it 2 years. PCOS or not, this isn't working. No one would blame you. Silence. I stood frozen, my hand on my coat. I'll think about it. The same words I'd used with Celeste. Passive. Compliant. The sterling family language for yes. They were discussing divorce, not whether I was worth keeping, but when to discard me. I walked back to the dining room, finished my meal, smiled when someone asked if I wanted dessert. No one noticed my hands shaking. That night I broke. I don't remember what triggered it. Maybe it was Warren's voice echoing in my head. Maybe it was the way Donovan had looked through me all evening, already imagining his life without me. Maybe it was just 2 years of holding myself together finally cracking. I stood in the shower, fully clothed water streaming over me, and sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. Great ugly choking sounds I'd been swallowing for months. I pressed my forehead against the tile and felt my body shake itself apart. Donovan knocked. "Am you okay?" I didn't answer. He knocked again. "Adrienne!" I reached out and locked the door. It was a small thing, a twist of metal, a click. But it was the first time I'd shut him out. The first time I'd chosen a barrier between us. He tried the handle. "Why'd you lock the door?" "I'm fine," I managed. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Just give me a minute." He waited a few seconds, then I heard his footsteps retreat. I stayed in that shower until the water ran cold, until my fingers pruned and my dress clung to me like a second skin. When I finally came out, Donovan was already asleep. That night, I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. Donovan wasn't my ally. He wasn't the partner I'd thought I married. He was part of the machine grinding me down. In November, I did something I'd never done before. I opened a bank account Donovan didn't know about. It wasn't dramatic. I walked into a Wells Fargo branch downtown, told them I wanted a personal checking account, and signed the papers. The banker asked if I wanted to add my husband. I said no. Every time I invoiced a client, I skimmed a little off the top before depositing into our joint account. $200 here, $500 there. Nothing Donovan would notice, but enough that if I ever needed to run, I'd have something to run with. I didn't let myself think too hard about what that meant. The week before Thanksgiving, my mother called. "I'm driving up," Constance said. "I'll be there Tuesday." "Mom, you don't have to—" "I'm coming." She arrived with an overnight bag and the same fierce expression she'd worn when I was 12, and a teacher had accused me of cheating on a test I'd studied for all week. She hugged me at the door, and I almost started crying again. That night, we sat in my kitchen drinking tea. The house felt different with her in it, smaller somehow, but safer. "Baby, you look like you're disappearing." I wrapped my hands around my mug. "I'm fine. Don't lie to your mother." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Listen to me. You don't owe them a child. You don't owe them anything. If I can't give them what they want, I'm nothing to them. And then you're nothing to the wrong people." Her voice was gentle but unyielding. "Your worth isn't measured by what you can produce for someone else's legacy. You hear me?" I did hear her. I'd heard versions of this before at my wedding after my diagnosis, but this time something shifted. Maybe it was Warren's voice in the hallway. Maybe it was the locked bathroom door. Maybe it was the secret bank account burning a hole in my conscience. "I can't go to their Thanksgiving dinner," I heard myself say. "Good, then don't. Donovan will be upset." "Let him." She made it sound so simple. Just say no. Just choose yourself. Like I hadn't spent 2 years learning that choosing myself meant disappointing everyone who mattered. But maybe the people it disappointed didn't actually matter. Thanksgiving came and went. Donovan went to his parents' house alone. I stayed home with my mother and ordered Chinese food and didn't apologize. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know that within 2 weeks, everything I thought I knew would shatter. I didn't know I'd find the old phone, the messages, the truth, buried in pixels and lies. I didn't know I was 2 weeks away from discovering exactly what I'd married into. All I knew was that I'd locked a door, opened a bank account, said no to a Thanksgiving dinner, small rebellions, tiny shifts. I'd been performing for people who would never applaud. I was done with the show. I found the first thread by accident. Donovan had flown to Denver for a 3-day business trip, something about a potential acquisition, though he'd stopped explaining his work to me months ago. The house felt different without him in it. Lighter. I could breathe without measuring each breath. I was in his home office looking for an old client contract when I noticed the drawer, the bottom one left side of his desk, locked. I'd seen him open it before with a small brass key, the kind that comes with cheap furniture. I'd found that key weeks earlier tucked in the pocket of a coat he never wore. I told myself I was just curious, that I had every right to look through drawers in my own house, but my hands shook as I turned the key. Inside tax documents from 2019, a folder of old business cards, and underneath everything wrapped in a soft cloth like something precious, an old phone. It was an iPhone 11, Donovan's previous model before he upgraded last year. The screen was dark, dead battery probably. I almost put it back, but something made me carry it to my office, plug it into an old charger, and wait. The Apple logo appeared, then the lock screen, then nothing. No passcode request. The phone opened straight to the home screen, frozen on a conversation from months ago. Text messages. Between Donovan and someone saved as Sienna B. My stomach dropped before I even read the words. April 2023. 8 months ago. Donovan, I miss you. This was a mistake. Sienna. Then why did you marry her? Donovan, because my father insisted. It won't be forever. Sienna, you said that 2 years ago before you even met her. Donovan, I know. I'm sorry. I'm working on it. Sienna, working on what, a divorce? Or are you going to keep playing house until your dad decides you've fulfilled your obligation? Donovan, give me time, please. The world tilted. I scrolled up. More messages. Scattered over months, sometimes weeks apart. Donovan reaching out. Sienna skeptical, but not shutting the door. A slow negotiation I hadn't known I was part of. I took photos of everything. My hands were steadier than my breathing. Then I called Harper. Harper, I need you to come over, now. What's wrong? I found something, please. She was there in 25 minutes. I handed her the phone without speaking, watched her face as she read. Her expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something cold and sharp, the lawyer she became in courtrooms, not the friend who drank wine with me on bad days. Okay, she said finally, setting the phone down like it might explode. Okay, listen to me carefully. You do not confront him with this. Not yet. Harper, Addie, listen. We need to be strategic. Men like Donovan, families like the Sterlings, they don't lose because you catch them in a lie. They lose because you have so much evidence they can't spin it. She gripped my shoulders. Do you trust me? Yes. Then we gather everything. Financial records, medical records, every text, every email, every witness who knows what they've done to you. And then only then do we act. I nodded numb. Harper sat across from me, her face softening slightly. My mother went through something similar. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Her family disowned her when she divorced my dad, said she was an embarrassment. She had nothing, no money, no support. I watched her struggle for years. She paused. Trevor Sterling's mother went through worse. Trevor, Donovan's cousin, Warren's nephew. Harper leaned forward. Trevor and I dated briefly in law school. It didn't work out, but we stayed friendly. That's how I know about his mother, Warren's sister. She left an abusive marriage in 2005, asked Warren for help. He told her she'd made her bed, that she was shaming the family by airing private matters. Then he cut her off completely. No financial support, no contact. The whole Sterling clan followed his lead. What happened to her? She raised Trevor alone, worked 2 jobs. Trevor was 14 when it happened, old enough to understand exactly what his family did. Harper's jaw tightened. He hasn't spoken to Warren in 10 years. Works for a consulting firm now, completely independent, and he hates everything the Sterlings stand for. Why are you telling me this? Because Trevor would help us. He's been waiting for a chance to expose what that family really is. Harper pulled out her phone. And because you need to understand, the Sterlings destroy women who don't comply. My mom barely survived. Trevor's mom died 5 years ago, still estranged from her family. I won't let that happen to you. The room felt very still. What do we do? I asked. Harper opened her notes app, started typing. First, financial records. Joint accounts, credit cards. Anything that shows where money's going. Second, medical records, your diagnosis. The pills Donovan's been giving you everything from Dr. Peterson. Third, communications. We need to know if there are more texts, more evidence of planning. Fourth, how do we get all that carefully? Some we can access legally because you're his wife. Some, she met my eyes, some we'll need help with. I have a private investigator I trust, and Trevor has connections in places we don't. I don't want to drag people into this. You're not dragging anyone. You're accepting help. Harper reached across the table, took my hand. Addie, you've been alone in this for 2 years. You don't have to be anymore. Something broke open in my chest. Relief, maybe, or terror, or both. Okay, I whispered. Tell me what to do. For now, act normal. Donovan comes back tomorrow. You smile, you nod, you don't let him see that anything's changed. Can you do that? I thought about the last 2 years. The dinners where I'd swallowed my words. The family gatherings where I'd made myself invisible. The nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was the problem. I can do that. Harper nodded. Good. I'll reach out to Trevor tonight, and I'll start pulling what I can access legally. We'll meet again this weekend, make a full plan. After she left, I sat alone with the phone, scrolled through the messages again, read Donovan's words. This was a mistake. It won't be forever, and felt something harden in my chest. I'd thought I was losing my mind, thought I was broken, failing not enough. But I wasn't the problem. I was the target. I plugged Donovan's phone back in, made sure it was charging, and placed it exactly where I'd found it wrapped in its cloth. Then I locked the drawer and put the key back in the coat pocket. Two could play at secrets. I didn't know how deep the lies went. Didn't know about the recording I'd find next, or the pills, or the web of manipulation that spanned years before I'd even met him. But I knew enough. I knew I wasn't crazy, and I knew I wasn't done. For 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. Harper had given me a checklist the night I found Donovan's phone, written in her precise lawyer's handwriting, financials, communications, medical records, witnesses. I worked through it, methodically moving through our house like a ghost. I opened drawers. Donovan thought I'd never touch photographed documents. He assumed I'd never question copied files from his laptop while he slept in the next room. He was traveling constantly Denver for 3 days, then Dallas, then Houston, and I used every minute he was gone. The house had never felt emptier or more like a crime scene I was documenting. The bank statements came first. Our joint account, the one Donovan had insisted we use for transparency after we got married, showed 15 transfers over the past year to a company called SB Consulting. The amounts varied, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, but they added up to $75,000, funneled to a Seattle-based LLC that didn't appear in any legitimate business directory. Harper ran the name through her legal databases and found the business registration within an hour. Owner Sienna Blake. Registered address a high-rise in downtown Seattle. Date of incorporation, March 2023, just 1 month after Donovan and I had our first real fight about my design studio. I sat at our kitchen table staring at the printouts until the numbers blurred into abstract shapes. He'd been paying her with our money. My money. $75,000 extracted from our shared account quietly, methodically, while he told me we needed to be careful with spending because the real estate market was uncertain. I'd believed him. I'd cut back on supplies for my studio. I'd turned down lunch invitations from friends because I thought we were saving. And the whole time he was building a life with someone else, funding it with money I'd helped earn. The medical record came next, and it changed everything. Harper had requested it from men's health specialists in San Antonio, a clinic I'd never heard of 2 hours south of Austin. The consent form arrived in a manila envelope, and I opened it at Harper's kitchen table while she made coffee. Patient name, Donovan James Sterling. Date of birth, March 14th, 1985. Date of procedure, July 15th, 2018. Age at procedure, 30 years. Procedure, bilateral vasectomy, surgical ligation. Method. I read the words twice before they made sense. Harper leaned over my shoulder and I heard her breath catch. Surgical ligation, she said quietly, tapping the line with one finger. That's the old method. They literally tie off the vas deferens with sutures instead of cauterizing the tissue. It's cheaper and faster, but it has a significantly higher failure rate than modern techniques. I looked up at her. What does that mean? She pulled the second page from the envelope, a post-operative instruction sheet with a section labeled Follow-up Appointments Recommended in bold print. 3 months post-op, 6 months, 1 year. Below that, a handwritten note in blue ink patient declined follow-up semen analysis. Harper's expression hardened. He didn't go back. Standard protocol after a vasectomy is to test the semen at 3 months and 6 months to confirm 0 sperm count. If he skipped those appointments, he'd have no way of knowing whether the procedure actually worked. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest. Why would he skip them? Harper set the paper down carefully. Arrogance. Denial. Maybe he assumed it was foolproof. But vasectomies aren't guaranteed, especially in younger men. Studies show that men under 35 have a recanalization rate of up to 1%. The vas deferens can grow back together on its own, especially with the ligation method, where there's just a tied-off tube instead of cauterized tissue. If Donovan didn't verify that his sperm count dropped to 0, he was walking around with no idea whether he was actually sterile. I stared at the form, trying to process what she was saying. Donovan had been 30 years old when he walked into that clinic, 5 years before he met me. He'd made the decision to never have children sign the paperwork and then never bothered to check if it had actually worked. And if the vasectomy had failed without his knowledge, then the pills he'd been giving me every morning weren't just an act of cruelty. They were insurance, a backup plan in case his body had betrayed his intentions. Harper must have seen something in my face because she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He built a system, she said quietly, 2 layers of control, and he thought it was foolproof. The recording came 1 week before Christmas. Harper had given me a voice-activated device the size of a USB stick, the kind private investigators used, and told me to plant it in Donovan's car. It's legally gray. She'd admitted her lawyer brain already running scenarios. Texas is a one-party consent state for recordings, but this is technically 0-party since neither of you will be in the car when it records. I'm not saying it'll hold up in court. I'm saying it'll give us leverage. I slipped it under the passenger seat of Donovan's Audi one night while he was inside showering my hands, shaking so badly I nearly dropped it twice. 3 days later, Harper and I sat in her downtown office and listened to the playback through her computer speakers. The audio quality was surprisingly clear. Warren's voice came first low and measured the tone he always used when delivering a verdict he expected no one to challenge. It's time to end this, Donovan. Cleanly, quietly. We'll offer her the house and $200,000 in cash. She'll sign the NDA. You'll be free by Valentine's Day. There was a pause, the sound of tires on pavement, then Donovan's voice quieter and uncertain, in a way I'd never heard before. What about the house we bought it together? Her name's on the deed. Warren's laugh was brief and humorless. The house stays in the family. We'll buy out her share. She takes the money, signs the paperwork, and disappears. Sienna's ready. You can make the engagement public on Valentine's Day if you want. Clean break, fresh start. Another pause. And if she doesn't sign, Warren's tone didn't shift. She will. Women like her always do. They take what's offered and move on. The recording clicked off. Harper stopped the playback and looked at me across her desk. I couldn't speak. I'd known they wanted me gone. I'd seen the texts. I'd found the bank transfers. But hearing them plan my exit like it was a corporate restructuring hearing, Warren dismissed me as women like her, made something inside me crystallize into pure cold fury. They underestimated you, Harper said quietly. I nodded. They had, and I was going to make them regret it. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since I'd heard that recording. My hands shook when I poured coffee. My stomach turned at the smell of eggs, of toast, of anything. Harper noticed. You look like hell, she said over the phone 2 days after we'd sat in her office listening to Warren plan my disposal. When's the last time you ate? I couldn't remember. You need to see a doctor, Harper said, and her tone left no room for argument. Not Peterson, someone who isn't on Warren's payroll. She took me to doctor. Patricia Morales, an OB-GYN, with an office on South Congress Avenue in a turquoise-painted house that looked more like an art gallery than a clinic. The waiting room smelled like lavender. Local paintings hung on the walls. I filled out intake forms with trembling hands while Harper sat beside me, scrolling through her phone like a sentinel. Dr. Morales was in her early 50s, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, and she had the kind of calm that made you feel like nothing could rattle her. She asked questions I wasn't expecting. "When was your last period?" I blinked. 6 weeks, maybe 7. She made a note. Nausea, fatigue, breast, tenderness. All of it, but I thought it was stress. She nodded. "Let's run a test." 10 minutes later, I was on the exam table in a paper gown staring at the ceiling tiles while Dr. Morales ran an ultrasound wand across my abdomen. The machine hummed. Then I heard it, a sound like a galloping horse, fast and rhythmic and impossibly small. That's a heartbeat," Dr. Morales said gently. "You're about 6 weeks pregnant, Adrienne." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "That's impossible. I have PCOS. Dr. Peterson said I'd have trouble conceiving." Dr. Morales frowned and pulled up my old records on her computer. She scrolled in silence, her frown deepening. "I'm looking at your 2021 labs, slightly elevated testosterone, a few small ovarian cysts on ultrasound. This is mild PCOS at best. It wouldn't prevent pregnancy." But he exaggerated, she said flatly. Or he lied. I felt like I was drowning. Dr. Morales leaned forward. "Adrienne, are you taking any medications? Birth control? Prenatal vitamins?" "Prenatal vitamins," I whispered. "My husband gives them to me every morning." Her expression shifted. "Can you bring me the bottle?" An hour later, Harper returned with the orange prescription bottle she'd grabbed from our bathroom. Dr. Morales opened it, examined a pill, and looked up at me. "This isn't a prenatal vitamin. It's Lostrin, a birth control pill." The world stopped. Harper's voice cut through the silence. "In Texas, that's reproductive coercion. If he's been giving you this without your knowledge, it's assault." I couldn't breathe. "But I'm pregnant." How Dr. Morales set the bottle down carefully. "Have you been taking these consistently?" I thought back. 7 weeks ago, the San Antonio trip, the design consultation that had run late. I'd been so frazzled I'd forgotten to pack the pills. I'd skipped 3 days. "I missed a few," I said. "Late October, a work trip." Dr. Morales pulled up a calendar. "That matches your conception window." I was shaking, but my husband had a vasectomy. 5 years ago, I found the consent form. Dr. Morales exchanged a look with Harper. "Do you have that form?" Harper pulled the photocopy from her bag. Dr. Morales read it slowly, and I watched her expression shift from neutral to something close to anger. He was 30 years old when he had this done, surgical ligation method, and he declined follow-up testing. She turned her screen toward me, pulling up what looked like a medical study. "Vasectomies aren't foolproof, Adrienne. The younger a man is at the time of the procedure, the higher the risk of recanalization. That means the vas deferens can reconnect on its own. It's rare, about 1%, but it happens. The surgical ligation method has a higher failure rate than cauterization, and without follow-up testing, he'd have no way of knowing if the vasectomy had failed." Harper leaned forward. "So the vasectomy might not have worked." "It's possible," Dr. Morales said. "Late recanalization 5 years out is extremely rare, but given his age, the method, and the lack of verification, it's within the realm of medical probability." I stared at her. "So he had a vasectomy that might have failed, and he gave me birth control pills disguised as vitamins. Why both?" Dr. Morales's voice was quiet. "If he wasn't certain the vasectomy had worked, the pills would have been a backup. Insurance. 2 layers of contraception." Harper's jaw tightened. "And when you stopped taking the pills, even for 3 days, both layers failed. That's how you got pregnant," Dr. Morales finished. "The vasectomy had failed without his knowledge, and you missed enough pills for ovulation to occur. It's the medical equivalent of lightning striking twice." I sat there numb. Donovan had planned for everything. 2 safeguards, 2 lies. And the only reason I was pregnant was because I'd forgotten to pack a bottle of pills on a business trip. I looked at Harper. What do? She didn't hesitate. You go to Christmas dinner, and you tell him. I left the clinic in a daze. Harper drove me home, but I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes staring at the house Donovan and I had bought together. The house I'd thought was ours. I thought about the recording, the $75,000, the fake diagnosis, the pills I'd swallowed every morning trusting him, and I thought about the baby growing inside me, the one thing Donovan had tried so hard to prevent. By the time I walked inside, I'd made my decision. I would go to Christmas dinner, I would sit at that table with Warren and Celeste and Donovan, and I would burn it all down. I walked into Christmas with 3 secrets, a recording, a pregnancy, and a plan. The days before Christmas were a performance. I smiled at Donovan over morning coffee. I asked about his meetings. I nodded when he talked about a new property development in Round Rock, pretending I didn't know he was funneling money to Sienna Blake in Seattle. I played the role I'd been playing for 2 years, the compliant wife who asked no questions and caused no trouble. But this time, I was acting, and I knew exactly when the curtain would fall. Every morning, Donovan handed me the orange pill bottle. "Don't forget your vitamins," he'd say, kissing my forehead like a dutiful husband. I'd swallow the pill in front of him, thank him, and wait until he left for work. Then I'd go to the bathroom and check the bottle Harper had given me the day after I found out I was pregnant. Same orange plastic, same prescription label, but inside were actual prenatal vitamins, the kind that supported a healthy pregnancy instead of preventing one. Harper had switched them while Donovan was in Houston, and he had no idea. For the first time in 2 years, I was taking care of myself, and he didn't even notice. I found Eleanor's note on a gray afternoon while I was searching through boxes in the guest room closet. Donovan had stored them there years ago, things from his grandmother's estate that Warren hadn't wanted in the main house. Most of it was unremarkable old books and faded photographs, but tucked inside a leather-bound journal was a handwritten card on cream stationery. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, unmistakably feminine. It was addressed to no one, dated October 2016, just months before Eleanor died. I read it twice, my hands trembling. For whoever carries our family name forward with honor. Legacy isn't blood, it's dignity. What we build matters less than how we treat the people we build it with. Remember that when the men in this family forget. Eleanor Sterling. I stared at the words until they blurred. Eleanor had known. She'd known what her son Warren was, what her family had become, and she'd left this note like a message in a bottle, hoping someone would find it. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. It felt like armor. 3 days before Christmas, Celeste called. Her voice was bright, too bright the way it always was when she was delivering bad news disguised as an invitation. "Adrian, darling, I wanted to let you know we've invited a guest to Christmas dinner. Sienna Blake. She's an old friend of Donovan's, and we thought it would be lovely to have her join us." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Sienna Blake." I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes, such a charming woman. Donovan speaks so highly of her." I closed my eyes. Of course they'd invited her. Of course they wanted me to sit at the same table as the woman my husband had been funding for a year. The woman he was planning to marry as soon as I signed the divorce papers they thought I didn't know about. It was a power move, a final humiliation designed to break me. "That sounds lovely," I said, my voice steady. "I look forward to meeting her." Celeste hesitated, clearly thrown by my calm. "Oh, well, good. We'll see you at 6. I hung up and immediately called Harper. Harper spent the next 2 days preparing. She drafted a counter-divorce proposal, brutal and precise, built on the evidence we'd gathered, the recording, the bank statements, the pills, the fake PCOS diagnosis. In Texas, reproductive coercion could be grounds for fault-based divorce, and drugging someone without their knowledge was assault. She outlined it all in clinical legal language. On Christmas Eve morning, Harper came to my house with a thick manila envelope. She set it on my kitchen table, the red tape across the flap making it look official, final. "Everything's in here," she said. "Bank statements, vasectomy records, the prescription bottle, the USB drive with the recording, your counter proposal. If they try to blindside you tonight, you pull this out. You don't negotiate. You show them what's inside, and you walk out." I stared at the envelope. It looked so ordinary, but inside was everything we'd worked for, 2 weeks of evidence, 2 years of lies exposed. What if I freeze? I asked. You won't. Harper squeezed my hand. You've been preparing for this without even knowing it. Every time you said no, every time you locked a door, every time you chose yourself, you were getting ready for tonight. She made me practice. Over and over, sitting at her kitchen table, rehearsing how to stay calm, how to deliver the facts without emotion, how to walk out if I needed to. You're not asking for permission, Harper said. You're informing them of reality. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and practiced one more time. I looked at the woman staring back at me, the one who'd spent 2 years shrinking herself to fit into a family that never wanted her. And I said the words out loud. I'm not broken. I'm not ashamed. I'm done. I said it until my voice didn't shake. Then I pulled Eleanor's note from my wallet and read it again. Legacy isn't blood, it's dignity. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the pocket of the red dress I'd chosen for tomorrow. It felt like a talisman. Like Eleanor was standing beside me telling me I had every right to burn it all down. Christmas Eve arrived. I put on the red dress, checked my reflection one last time, and picked up Harper's envelope from the kitchen counter. It was heavy in my hands. Then I got in my car and drove to the Sterling estate in Westlake Hills, the house where I'd first met Warren and Celeste, the house where I'd swallowed my pride 100 times. Tonight I would either break or be free. I was betting on freedom. Before I reveal what happened at that Christmas dinner, I need to know you're still with me. Drop a 1 in the comments if you want to see how this unfolds. Your engagement keeps me going. And a quick reminder, the story ahead includes some fictionalized details for dramatic effect. If you'd rather not continue, feel free to pause here. But if you stay, you're about to witness the confrontation that changed everything. The Sterling estate glittered like a lie wrapped in fairy lights. I pulled up the circular driveway just after 6, my headlights sweeping across the limestone facade, the towering live oaks draped in white string lights. The front door wreathed in magnolia and red velvet ribbon. The house looked like something out of a Christmas catalog, pristine and perfect, and I felt the old reflex kick in the urge to smooth my dress, check my reflection, make myself smaller. Then I touched the folded note in my pocket, Eleanor's words against my fingertips, and the reflex died. I wasn't here to shrink. I was here to detonate. Inside the foyer was warm and crowded. 22 guests, Harper had told me, executives from Sterling Properties business partners, a few high society Austin families, Warren and Celeste collected like trophies. I recognized Gerald Tucker near the bar, the man whose apartment project I'd designed, while Donovan undermined me in meetings. He nodded at me, polite and distant, and I nodded back. A server in black and white offered me champagne. I took it, but didn't drink. I needed to be sharp tonight. I needed to remember everything. Sienna Blake stood near the fireplace, and I saw her before she saw me. She was tall, elegant, in an emerald silk dress that looked like it cost more than my car. Her dark hair swept into a low chignon, but it was the earrings that made me stop. Emerald studs, antique cut, surrounded by tiny diamonds. I'd seen them in a photograph once in a frame on Celeste's vanity. They'd belonged to Eleanor Sterling. Celeste had given them to Sienna. The message was clear: this is who we chose. This is who belongs. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Sienna turned, saw me, and smiled. It was a polite smile, slightly uncertain, the smile of someone who'd been told a story and wasn't sure if it was true. You must be Adrienne, she said, extending her hand. Her voice was warm, professional, the voice of someone used to navigating boardrooms. Sienna Blake, it's nice to finally meet you. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm. She had no idea what she was walking into. Nice to meet you too, I said, and I meant it. Sienna wasn't the enemy. She was a pawn, just like I'd been. The door opened behind me, and I heard Celeste's voice rise in surprise. Trevor, what a lovely surprise. I turned. Trevor Sterling stood in the doorway, tall and lean in a charcoal suit, his expression carefully neutral. Harper was beside him, her hand on his arm, and I felt a rush of gratitude so intense it nearly knocked me over. She'd brought him. She'd brought backup. Donovan appeared from the hallway, his smile faltering when he saw Trevor. Cousin, he said the word stiff. Didn't know you were coming." Trevor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Harper invited me. I hope that's not a problem." Warren's voice cut through the room, low and cold. "Of course not. Family is always welcome." But his eyes said otherwise. Trevor was a reminder of the sister Warren had destroyed the nephew he'd abandoned. His presence was a crack in Warren's perfect facade, and I could see the older man's jaw tighten. Dinner was announced, and we moved into the formal dining room. The table was absurd, stretched to seat 28, covered in white linen and gold-rimmed china, and enough candles to stage a seance. I was seated between Donovan and Celeste, boxed in exactly as they'd planned. Harper and Trevor were across the table far enough that I couldn't speak to them easily, but close enough that I could see their faces. Sienna sat near Warren in the seat that should have been mine if I'd ever actually been part of this family. The first course arrived oysters on ice champagne mignonette, and the room filled with the low murmur of polite conversation, the kind of performative small talk that made my skin crawl. Then Warren stood. He tapped his crystal wine glass with a knife, the sharp chime cutting through the noise. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to the head of the table. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," Warren said, his voice smooth and commanding. "It's wonderful to gather with friends and family during the holidays. Before we continue, Donovan has something he'd like to share." He sat down, his expression expectant. I looked at Donovan. He was smiling, but there was something brittle in it, something desperate. He stood, cleared his throat, and reached into the leather briefcase at his feet. My pulse spiked. He pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table in front of me. The room went very still. "Adrienne." Donovan said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think it's time we were honest. Our marriage isn't working. It hasn't been for a long time. I've had my attorney draw up a settlement offer. The house, $200,000, and an NDA. It's generous. All you have to do is sign." He slid the folder toward me, his hand steady, his eyes cold. "Let's end this cleanly tonight." I stared at the folder. My name was typed on the label in neat black letters, Adrienne Walsh Sterling. Around the table, I could feel the shift, the collective intake of breath, the eyes turning toward me like searchlights. Gerald Tucker looked uncomfortable. Celeste's expression was triumphant. Sienna's face had gone pale, and Warren looked furious. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "Donovan," he said, his voice tight. "I thought we agreed this would be handled privately." Donovan didn't look at his father. His eyes were locked on me. "I'm handling it." "You're making a scene," Warren hissed. "This isn't what we discussed." "I'm finishing it," Donovan said louder now, and I realized he was enjoying this. He wanted me to break in front of everyone. He wanted me to cry, to beg to sign the papers and disappear quietly while they all watched. He thought public humiliation would make me compliant. I looked at the folder, then I looked at Harper. She was leaning forward slightly, her expression calm. She reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with red tape across the flap. She slid it across the table to me. "Everything you need," Harper said quietly, her voice steady. "It's all in here." The room was silent. All eyes were on the envelope. Donovan's smile faltered. Warren's expression shifted from expectant to wary. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy, substantial, the weight of 2 weeks of Harper's investigation condensed into paper and evidence. I broke the seal slowly, deliberately, and reached inside. First, I pulled out Eleanor's note, the one I'd found in the guest room closet, the one that had given me courage when I had none. I unfolded it and set it on the table beside Donovan's manila folder, Eleanor's elegant script visible to anyone who cared to look. Then I reached back into the envelope. "Let me show you what else is in here," I said, my voice calm and clear. I looked up at Donovan, at Warren, at Celeste, at all 22 guests watching me like I was a performer in a play they hadn't bought tickets for, and I smiled. I didn't open Donovan's folder. Instead, I reached into Harper's envelope and pulled out the first document. It was a bank statement highlighted in yellow showing 15 wire transfers from our joint account to SB Consulting, LLC in Seattle. This I said, holding it up, shows $75,000 transferred from our shared account money I helped earn to a company owned by Sienna Blake. I looked at Sienna. Her face had gone white. The woman my husband has been funding for over a year. The woman he planned to marry the moment I signed these papers. I set the bank statement on the table and reached back into the envelope. This, I said, pulling out the next document, is a consent form from Men's Health Specialists in San Antonio. Patient name, Donovan James Sterling. Date of procedure, July 15, 2018. Procedure, bilateral vasectomy. I slid it toward the center of the table where several guests leaned forward to see. My husband had a vasectomy 5 years ago. He was 30 years old. He walked into that clinic and made sure he'd never have children. He never told me. Gasps rippled through the room. Donovan's face had gone gray. I reached into the envelope again. This, I said, pulling out the orange prescription bottle, is labeled prenatal vitamins. My husband gave me one every morning for 2 years. He told me it would help us conceive. I set the bottle on the table, the plastic gleaming under the chandelier light. It's not a prenatal vitamin. It's Lostrin. Birth control pills. He was drugging me. Every single day, without my knowledge, without my consent. The room erupted in whispers. I let them talk. Then I reached into the envelope one more time and pulled out a small USB drive. And this, I said, holding it up, is a recording. A conversation between my husband and his father recorded in Donovan's car 2 weeks ago, planning exactly how they'd dispose of me. I looked at Harper. She reached into her bag and set a small Bluetooth speaker on the table. I handed her the USB drive. She inserted it, pressed play, and Warren and Donovan's voices filled the dining room, clear and unmistakable. It's time to end this, Donovan. Cleanly, quietly. We'll offer her the house and $200,000. She'll sign the NDA. You'll be free by Valentine's Day. What about the house we bought it together? Her name's on the deed. The house stays in the family. We'll buy out her share. She takes the money, signs the paperwork, and disappears. Sienna's ready. You can make the engagement public on Valentine's Day if you want. Clean break, fresh start. And if she doesn't sign, she will. Women like her always do. The playback ended. The silence that followed was absolute. 22 guests stared at the speaker at me, at Donovan, trying to process what they'd just heard. Gerald Tucker's face had gone white. Celeste's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Warren's expression was stone, but I saw the fury beneath it. Donovan looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I stood. My chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet. My name is Adrienne Walsh. I said, my voice calm and clear. And for the past 2 years, I've been the victim of reproductive coercion, fraud, and assault. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of documents Harper had prepared. I set them on the table one by one, like cards in a poker game I'd already won. This is Donovan's vasectomy consent form. July 15, 2018. He was 30 years old. He walked into a clinic in San Antonio and made sure he'd never have children. I slid it toward the center of the table. A few guests leaned forward to see. He never told me. Instead, he spent 2 years pretending we were trying to conceive. He took me to a doctor who gave me a fake PCOS diagnosis to make me think my body was broken. I pulled out the next document. This is a prescription bottle labeled prenatal vitamins. My husband gave me one every morning, told me it would help us get pregnant. I set the bottle on the table. The orange plastic gleamed under the chandelier light. It's not a prenatal vitamin. It's Lostrin. Birth control pills. He was drugging me every single day, without my knowledge, without my consent. Sienna Blake made a small choked sound. I looked at her and I saw the exact moment the truth hit. Her face drained of color. Celeste told me you were separated, she whispered. She said the marriage was already over. She said you were a gold digger, I finished. I know, she lied to you, Sienna, just like they lied to me. Sienna's hands were shaking. She reached up, removed the emerald earrings, Eleanor's earrings, and set them carefully on the table. Then she stood. I don't want any part of this, she said, her voice tight. She looked at Celeste, at Warren, at Donovan. You people are monsters. She walked out. The front door slammed behind her and the sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I picked up the final document. This is a medical report from Dr. Patricia Morales, dated December 18th. It confirms that I'm 8 weeks pregnant. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, shocked and confused. I kept talking louder now. Donovan's vasectomy failed. The vas deferens reconnected on its own. It's called recanalization, and it happens in about 1% of cases. He didn't know because he never bothered to get follow-up testing. So he gave me birth control pills as insurance. 2 layers of contraception. 2 layers of control. I looked at Donovan. His face was gray. But I forgot to take the pills on a work trip in October, and both safeguards failed. I'm pregnant with your child, Donovan. The child you spent 5 years and 2 criminal acts trying to prevent. Trevor Sterling stood. All eyes turned to him. He was tall, calm, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd been waiting years to say these words. "I'll testify," he said, "to everything I know about this family, about what Warren did to my mother, about the pattern of abuse, manipulation, and control that's been happening for decades." He looked at me. "I won't let them do this to another woman." Warren's face twisted. "You have no right." "I have every right," Trevor said. "I'm family. Remember." Harper stood beside me and handed me a folder. I opened it and pulled out the counter proposal she'd drafted. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady. "I keep the house, all of it, the full $1.2 million property in Clarksville. I also receive $425,000 in compensatory damages for fraud, reproductive coercion, and emotional distress." I looked at Donovan. "And you will pay $8,500 a month in child support. That's 20% of your income, which is the Texas guideline for 1 child." I set the document on the table in front of Warren. "In exchange, I won't press criminal charges for drugging me without my consent, which under Texas law is assault." I let that sink in. "You have 48 hours to sign. If I don't hear from your attorney by December 26th at noon, I'm filing a police report. And I'm going to every journalist in Austin with this story, these recordings and these documents." I looked around the table at the 22 guests who'd come for a nice Christmas dinner and gotten a front row seat to the Sterling family's destruction. Merry Christmas. I walked out. Harper followed her heels, clicking on the marble floor. Behind us, the dining room exploded into chaos voices, shouting chairs, scraping Celeste's high-pitched denials. I didn't look back. I made it to Harper's car, climbed into the passenger seat, and closed the door. And then finally, I started to cry. Not sad tears, not broken tears. Relief. 2 years of silence, of swallowing my voice, of shrinking myself to fit into a family that never wanted me. It all came pouring out in great shuddering sobs. Harper got in beside me, started the engine, and drove. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She'd already said everything that mattered. "You're not asking for permission. You're informing them of reality." And I had. I'd walked into that house as Adrienne Sterling, the compliant wife, the woman they thought they could erase. I walked out as Adrienne Walsh, and I was never going back. Harper drove me to her apartment. I couldn't go home, not to the house I'd shared with Donovan, not to the bed where I'd slept beside him for 2 years, while he lied to me every morning. Harper didn't ask. She just drove one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the console between us like an anchor. The streets were empty. Christmas Eve in Austin, everyone tucked into their homes, lights glowing warm through windows. I watched the city slide past and felt like I was seeing it for the first time in years. Or maybe I was seeing it clearly for the first time ever. Harper's apartment was in a modern building downtown, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. She unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, and pointed me toward the couch. "Sit. I'll get you water." I sat. My legs felt like they might give out if I stood much longer. The adrenaline that had carried me through the dinner, through the confrontation, through the moment I'd stood in front of 22 people and detonated my marriage, it was draining out of me now, leaving me hollow and shaking. Harper came back with a glass of water and a thick blanket. She draped the blanket over my shoulders and sat beside me. "You did it," she said quietly. I nodded. I couldn't speak yet. My throat was tight, my hands trembling around the water glass. I'd done it. I'd walked into that house, faced Warren and Celeste and Donovan, and I'd told the truth. And I'd walked out alive. My phone started buzzing. I pulled it out of my bag and stared at the screen. Donovan, then Warren, then Donovan again. Text after text, call after call, the notifications stacking up like an avalanche. I unlocked the phone and read the first message from Donovan. We need to talk. This is insane. You can't do this. Then another. Adrian, please, let's work this out. You're not thinking clearly. Warren's text was colder. You've made a serious mistake. We'll see you in court. I felt Harper lean over to read the messages. Her jaw tightened. Block them, she said. All of them. Right now. I hesitated. But the deadline, they'll communicate through me. You're my client. All contact goes through your attorney. That's me. Block them, Addie. I blocked Donovan's number, then Warren's, then Celeste's just in case. The silence that followed felt like oxygen. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was Trevor. I opened his text. Warren left 20 minutes after you did. Didn't say a word to anyone, just walked out. Donovan stayed. He smashed a wine glass in the kitchen and yelled at Celeste. Guests are talking. This is going to spread fast. Are you okay? I typed back with shaking fingers. I'm okay. Thank you for being there. His reply came immediately. Anytime. You were incredible tonight. I set the phone down and looked at Harper. Trevor says it's already spreading. Harper nodded. Good. Let them talk. The more people who know what Donovan and Warren did, the harder it'll be for them to spin this as anything other than what it is. She leaned back against the couch. 22 witnesses, Addie. That's 22 people who heard that recording, who saw the evidence, who watched you stand up for yourself. Warren can't control the narrative anymore. I thought about the guests. Gerald Tucker, who'd looked so uncomfortable. The executives from Sterling Properties who'd probably already texted their spouses, their friends, their colleagues. The high society families who thrived on gossip. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Austin's upper circles would know. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't pretending. The truth was out, and I didn't have to carry the weight of it alone anymore. Harper handed me a cup of tea. You need to sleep, she said. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but tonight you just need to rest. I wrapped my hands around the mug, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers. Harper, I said quietly, I'm going to have this baby. Alone. She looked at me, her expression soft. I know. I don't know if I can do this. You can, Harper said firmly. You're one of the strongest people I know, and you're not alone. I'm here. Your mom's here. Trevor's here. You've got people, Addie. I felt tears prick my eyes again, but this time they were different. Not the racking sobs from the car, just quiet, grateful tears. I'm going to be a mother, I whispered. Harper smiled. You're going to be an incredible mother. I finished the tea and lay down on Harper's couch, the blanket pulled up to my chin. My body ached. My mind buzzed with everything that had happened, but beneath it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I'd walked into that dinner terrified. I'd walked out free. And tomorrow when the sun came up, I'd start figuring out what came next. But tonight, I let myself rest. I didn't know yet that the baby I carried was a boy. I didn't know that in 3 weeks, one more secret would surface. A secret Eleanor Sterling had buried deep in legal documents and trust funds. A secret that would secure my child's future in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But I would find out. And when I did, I'd understand that Eleanor had been waiting for someone like me all along. Someone who'd fight back. Someone who'd survive. I fell asleep on Harper's couch, wrapped in safety and silence, and for the first time in 2 years, I slept through the night. Donovan's attorney called on December 26th. Harper and I were at her apartment nursing coffee and leftover Christmas cookies my mom had dropped off the night before. When Harper's phone rang, she looked at the screen, then at me. It's them, she said. I set down my mug. My hands were steady. Harper answered on speaker. This is Harper Quinn." The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, the kind of voice trained to diffuse conflict. "Ms. Quinn, this is Richard Brennan, representing Donovan Sterling. My client is prepared to discuss settlement terms." Harper's expression didn't change. "I'm listening." "Mr. Sterling is willing to offer Mrs. Sterling the Clarksville property and $200,000 in exchange for a mutual non-disclosure agreement and dismissal of all claims." Harper let the silence stretch. Then she said, "No." Brennan hesitated. "Excuse me. Your client drugged my client without her knowledge or consent for 2 years. That's assault under Texas Penal Code 22.01. If Mr. Sterling doesn't agree to our terms by 5 p.m., today we're filing a police report tomorrow morning, and I'm CCing the Austin American-Statesman on the press release." Another pause. Then quietly, "What are your terms?" Harper laid it out with surgical precision. 100% ownership of the Clarksville house, valued at $1.2 million. $425,000 in compensatory damages for fraud, reproductive coercion, and emotional distress. $8,500 per month in child support consistent with Texas guidelines for one child. And Donovan would relinquish all custody and visitation rights. Adrienne would have sole legal and physical custody. His name would be removed from the birth certificate by mutual agreement. He would have no involvement in the child's life. In exchange, Adrienne would not press criminal charges, and both parties would sign a non-disclosure agreement. Brennan said he'd call back. He called back 2 hours later. "We agree to the terms. We'll have the paperwork ready by January 10th. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal documents, revisions, and phone calls. Harper walked me through every clause, every line, making sure I understood what I was signing and what I was walking away from. The NDA meant I couldn't talk publicly about the pills, the fake diagnosis, the reproductive coercion. But I'd already told the truth to 22 people on Christmas Eve. The story was out. The NDA was just Warren's attempt to control the damage. On January 10th, I sat in Harper's office and signed my name 37 times. Donovan wasn't there. His attorney delivered the signed documents by courier. Harper witnessed every signature, then handed me a copy of the settlement agreement in a leather folder. "It's done," she said. I looked at the folder. My name was on the cover. Adrienne Walsh. Not Sterling, just Walsh. I was free. I moved back into the Clarksville house the next day. Donovan had already cleared out his things, his clothes, his laptop, the framed photos of him and Warren at various Sterling Properties groundbreakings. The house felt bigger without him, lighter, like I could finally breathe. My mom flew in from San Antonio and helped me repaint the second bedroom. We chose a soft sage green, calming and warm. I ordered a crib online, a white wooden one with clean lines. Constance hung blackout curtains and assembled a changing table. While I sorted through baby clothes, Trevor's mom had sent tiny onesies and soft blankets in blues and yellows. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," my mom said, folding a onesie with a dinosaur on it. I looked at her, this woman who'd raised me alone after my dad left, who'd worked 2 jobs to put me through design school, who'd never once made me feel like I was too much or not enough. "I hope so," I said. She smiled. "I know so." I went back to Dr. Morales for a checkup in mid-January. She did an ultrasound, measured the baby's heartbeat, checked my blood pressure. Everything was healthy. Everything was progressing normally. "Do you want to know the sex?" she asked, looking at the screen. I hesitated. Then I nodded. "Yes," she smiled. "It's a boy." A boy. I was going to have a son. I drove home in a daze, one hand on my belly, thinking about all the things I wanted to teach him. How to be kind, how to stand up for himself, how to recognize when someone was trying to control him, and how to walk away. I wanted him to grow up knowing he was wanted, loved, safe, that he didn't owe anyone his silence or his compliance. That legacy wasn't about money or power or family name. It was about how you treated people. It was about dignity. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in 3 years. Not since before I met Donovan, before the Sterling family, before I started shrinking myself to fit into a space that was never meant for me. I slept in my own bed in my own house with my son growing safely inside me and my future stretching out ahead of me like an open road. I didn't know yet that Eleanor Sterling had left me one more gift. I didn't know that in less than a week I'd receive a certified letter from a law firm in Dallas, a letter that would explain why Eleanor had written that note about legacy and dignity, why she'd buried a secret in legal documents and trust funds, why she'd been waiting for someone like me. But I would find out. 3 weeks after Christmas, the letter arrived, and when I opened it, I understood that Eleanor hadn't just believed in me. She'd planned for me. The letter arrived on a gray January afternoon. I was sitting in the nursery folding tiny clothes and sorting them into the dresser Harper had helped me assemble, when I heard the mailbox click shut outside. I walked downstairs, one hand on my belly. Owen was moving more now little flutters that still surprised me, and opened the front door. A thick envelope sat on the porch, certified mail, the return address stamped with a law firm I didn't recognize. Bernard Klein and Associates, Dallas, Texas. My stomach dropped. Another attorney. Another fight. I tore open the envelope, hands shaking, and pulled out the letter inside. Dear Ms. Walsh, I am writing to inform you that you have been designated as the guardian and trustee of the Eleanor Owen Sterling Trust, established in 2016. As the mother of Donovan Sterling's biological child, you are now responsible for managing the trust assets on behalf of the primary beneficiary, your son. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to schedule a meeting and review the trust documents. Sincerely, Bernard Klein, Esquire. I read it 3 times. Guardian, trustee, Eleanor Owen Sterling Trust. I didn't understand. Eleanor had died in 2016. I'd never met her. I'd only seen her photograph once, tucked in a box in Donovan's closet, and read the note she'd left behind about legacy and dignity. Why would she leave a trust for my son? How did she even know he would exist? I called Harper. She answered on the first ring. What's wrong? I just got a letter from a lawyer in Dallas. I said, my voice tight. Something about a trust. Eleanor Sterling's trust. I don't understand. Harper was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there. We drove to Dallas 2 days later. Harper insisted on coming with me, and I was grateful. The law offices of Bernard Klein and Associates were on the 30th floor of a glass tower downtown, the kind of place that smelled like leather and money. The receptionist led us into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Bernard Klein was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd spent decades managing other people's fortunes. He shook my hand, gestured for us to sit, and opened a leather binder on the table. Ms. Walsh, he said, I've been managing the Eleanor Sterling Trust since it was established in March of 2016. Mrs. Sterling came to me 8 months before she passed away and asked me to create an irrevocable trust for her first grandchild. At the time, Donovan Sterling had no children and no immediate plans to have any. But Mrs. Sterling was insistent. She wanted to ensure that if a grandchild was ever born, they would have financial security independent of the Sterling family. I stared at him. Why? Klein's expression softened. She told me her son Warren Sterling had become someone she no longer recognized. She said the family was toxic and she didn't trust them to do right by any child born into it. So she set aside her personal assets, investments, property she'd inherited from her own family, savings she'd accumulated independently, and created a trust that neither Warren nor Donovan could access. Harper leaned forward. How much are we talking about? The trust is currently valued at $580,000, Klein said. It will continue to grow through conservative investments until the beneficiary reaches the age of 25. At that point, he will have full access to the funds. I couldn't breathe. $580,000 for Owen, for my son. Eleanor had set this aside before Donovan and I had even met, before I existed in his life, before any of this had happened. She'd seen what her family was and decided to protect a child who didn't even exist yet. Klein slid a sealed envelope across the table. Mrs. Sterling left this for whoever would be raising her grandchild. She asked me to give it to you when the time came. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The letter inside was handwritten on cream stationery, the same elegant script I'd seen in the note from the attic. To whoever raises my grandchild, if you are reading this, it means Warren did not succeed in erasing me entirely. It means my grandchild exists, and you are the one caring for them. I do not know who you are, but I hope you are strong. I hope you are kind. I hope you understand that the Sterling name is not a gift, it is a weight. I established this trust in the spring of 2016, when I realized my son had become the kind of man who would hurt others to maintain control. I saw what he did to his sister. I saw how he raised Donovan. I knew that if my grandchild were ever born into this family, they would need protection from the very people who claim to love them. This money is not Warren's. It is not Donovan's. It is mine, earned and saved over a lifetime of quiet resistance. Use it for my grandchild's education, their future, their freedom. Do not let the Sterling family define who this child becomes. Legacy is not blood, it is dignity. It is the choice to treat people with respect, to value kindness over power, to build something that lasts, not because it bears your name, but because it reflects your values. Raise my grandchild to be better than we were. That is all I ask. With hope, Eleanor Owen Sterling. I set the letter down. Tears were streaming down my face and I didn't bother wiping them away. Eleanor had known. She'd known what her family would do, and she'd fought back the only way she could. She'd built a fortress around a child she would never meet, and she'd trusted that someone, me, would be there to stand in the gap. Harper's hand found mine under the table. Klein waited patient and kind while I pulled myself together. Finally, I looked up at him. "What do I need to do?" "Sign the trust documents," he said. "Accept the role of trustee. Manage the funds responsibly for your son's benefit. The trust is ironclad. Warren and Donovan have no claim to it. They can't challenge it. They can't access it. They can't touch a single dollar. It's yours to steward for Owen." Owen. I hadn't told anyone the name yet, but hearing it out loud in this room with Eleanor's letter in my hands, it felt right. I signed the documents. Harper witnessed. Klein handed me a copy of the trust agreement in a binder, and we left. On the drive back to Austin, Harper asked me, "How did you decide on the name Owen?" I looked out the window at the highway stretching ahead of us. It was Eleanor's maiden name, Eleanor Owen Sterling. I wanted to honor her. She gave my son a future. The least I could do was give him a name that remembers where he came from, not from the Sterling family, but from someone who cared enough to protect him before he was even born. Harper smiled. "It's perfect." I touched my belly, feeling Owen move beneath my hand. Eleanor had been gone for 8 years, but somehow she was still here, watching over us, giving us a way forward, a bridge between the past and the future. And I swore, sitting in that car with the Texas plains rolling past and my son safe inside me, that I would raise him the way Eleanor had hoped, with dignity, with kindness, with the knowledge that legacy wasn't about money or power or a family name. It was about the choices you made and the people you protected and the love you gave freely, without conditions. Owen would know that. I would make sure of it. While I was building a nursery, Donovan's world was collapsing. I heard about it in pieces through Harper's careful phone calls and Trevor's occasional texts, but I kept my distance. I didn't need to watch. I had Owen to think about now, a life to prepare for a future that had nothing to do with the Sterling family, but just as it turned out, didn't need me to chase it. It came for them on its own. In February, Gerald Tucker walked into a board meeting at Sterling Properties with a forensic accountant and a folder full of evidence. Donovan had been embezzling for 3 years, over $300,000 siphoned from client escrow accounts, development budgets, and company reserves. Most of it had gone to Sienna Blake's consulting firm. The $75,000 I'd uncovered in the divorce was just the beginning. The rest had funded Donovan's lifestyle, the Audi, the tailored suits, the weekend trips to Seattle I'd thought were business conferences. Gerald had been quietly investigating since January after the Christmas dinner, after he'd watched me lay out the recordings and the pills and the vasectomy form in front of 22 witnesses. He'd always disliked Donovan. I'd seen it years ago when Donovan undermined me in meetings, dismissed my designs, treated Gerald's projects like stepping stones instead of collaborations. But dislike wasn't enough. Gerald needed proof. And once he started looking, he found it everywhere. The board fired Donovan on March 5th. Warren tried to protect him, tried to call it a misunderstanding, an accounting error, but the evidence was ironclad. Bank statements wire transfers emails between Donovan and Sienna discussing consulting fees that had no corresponding work product. The board voted unanimously to terminate Donovan's employment and refer the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Gerald called Harper that night to let her know. Harper called me. "It's done," she said. "He's out." I set down the phone and stood in the nursery, one hand on my belly, feeling Owen kick. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired and free. Warren tried to hold on, but the scandal was too much. The Christmas dinner story had already spread through Austin's business community. 22 witnesses will do that. And now Donovan's embezzlement was front-page news in the Austin Business Journal. Clients pulled contracts. Investors demanded answers. By April, the board asked Warren to step down. He refused at first, threatened lawsuits, called in favors, but Gerald had the votes. On April 22nd, Warren Sterling announced his retirement effective immediately. Gerald Tucker became the acting CEO of Sterling Properties. A week later, the board made it permanent. Warren was gone. The company he'd built, the legacy he'd tried to force on Donovan, was now in the hands of the man Donovan had spent years belittling. Harper sent me the press release and I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't need to keep score anymore. Sienna Blake filed a restraining order against Donovan in late April. According to Trevor, Donovan had been calling her obsessively since the Christmas dinner, showing up at her office in Seattle, sending her gifts she didn't want. She'd blocked his number, changed her work schedule, but he kept finding ways to contact her. The restraining order was granted within 48 hours. A judge reviewed the evidence: text messages, voicemails, security footage of Donovan waiting outside her building, and issued an order prohibiting Donovan from coming within 500 feet of Sienna or contacting her in any way. Trevor said Sienna had hired a lawyer and was considering a civil suit for fraud and emotional distress. I hope she won. Dr. Raymond Peterson lost his medical license in May. Harper had filed a complaint with the Texas Medical Board in January outlining the fake PCOS diagnosis, the conspiracy to provide me with birth control pills disguised as prenatal vitamins, and Peterson's failure to document any legitimate medical basis for his conclusions. The board opened an investigation. They reviewed my medical records, interviewed Dr. Patricia Morales, and subpoenaed Peterson's files. In May, they found that Peterson had violated multiple sections of the Texas Medical Practice Act, including unprofessional conduct, fraudulent diagnosis, and failure to obtain informed consent. His license was suspended immediately pending a final hearing. In June, the suspension became permanent. Peterson could no longer practice medicine in Texas. Harper called to tell me, and I cried. Not for him. For every woman he might have lied to, every patient he might have manipulated, and for the fact that he'd finally been stopped. While their world crumbled, mine grew. In March, I landed a contract to design the interiors for a new boutique hotel in South Congress. The owner had heard about me through a friend of Harper's, someone who'd been at the Christmas dinner and had later told her wife the whole story. By April, I had 2 more clients, a law firm redesigning their downtown offices, and a family in Tarrytown who wanted help with a whole house renovation. My reputation, it turned out, wasn't ruined by the Sterling scandal. It was enhanced. People in Austin respected someone who'd stood up to a powerful family and won. And they wanted to work with someone who understood that design wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about creating spaces where people felt safe, seen, respected. I hired an assistant in May, a recent UT grad named Maya, who was smart and eager and didn't ask questions about my past. My business was thriving. Harper and Trevor were constants. Harper came over every Sunday with takeout and helped me assemble baby furniture, a crib, a changing table, a rocking chair Constance had shipped from San Antonio. Trevor texted me articles about fatherhood and single parenting, even though he'd never had kids himself. "You're going to be amazing," he said once over coffee in June. "You already are." I believed him. My mom flew in twice, once in April for the anatomy scan, and again in July for a baby shower Harper insisted on throwing. It was small, just Harper, Trevor, my mom, and a few of my new clients who'd become friends, but it felt like family. The kind I'd chosen, the kind that stayed. Donovan left Austin in June. He took a job with a small commercial real estate firm in Dallas, a demotion so steep it was almost embarrassing. But no one in Austin would hire him. The embezzlement, the divorce, the Christmas dinner, it was all too public, too messy. He packed up his apartment, said goodbye to no one, and disappeared. I didn't know where he was living. I didn't care. He was out of my life, out of Owen's life, and that was all that mattered. Warren retired to the family estate in Westlake Hills. I heard through Trevor that he barely left the house anymore, that Celeste had stopped hosting dinners, that the once impenetrable Sterling social circle had quietly dissolved. Legacy, it turned out, was fragile. You could spend a lifetime building it and lose it all in one night. By July, I was 38 weeks pregnant, moving slowly, nesting with a single-minded intensity that made Harper laugh. I washed Owen's clothes 3 times. I reorganized the nursery twice. I packed and repacked my hospital bag. I was ready. I was terrified. I was more myself than I'd been in years. On the night of August 9th, I went to bed early, one hand on my belly, feeling Owen shift and roll beneath my skin. I was thinking about Eleanor, about the trust she'd left him, about the note she'd written to a woman she'd never met. I was thinking about my mom, who'd raised me alone and taught me that strength didn't mean never breaking it, meant getting back up. I was thinking about Harper and Trevor and the family I'd built from the wreckage of the one I'd lost. And I was thinking about the future, Owen's future, bright and open and full of possibilities that had nothing to do with the Sterling name. At 3:42 in the morning on August 10th, my water broke. Owen Michael Walsh was born on August 12, 2024 at St. David's Medical Center in Austin. He weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces, was 20 inches long, and had a full head of dark hair that reminded me of the baby photos my mom had shown me of myself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My water broke at 3:42 in the morning on August 10th. I was asleep in my bed, the nursery door open, so I could see the soft glow of the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, when I felt the warm rush and sat up, heart pounding. For a moment I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, one hand on my belly, thinking, this is it. This is the moment everything changes. Then I called my mom. She answered on the first ring. She'd been sleeping with her phone on her pillow for 2 weeks, waiting for this call. "It's time," I said, and I heard her moving before I'd even finished the sentence. "I'm on my way. Call Harper. I'll meet you at the hospital." Harper arrived at my house 20 minutes later, still in sweatpants and a UT hoodie, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She helped me into the car, tossed my hospital bag into the trunk, and drove through the empty pre-dawn streets of Austin like she was qualifying for a race. By the time we got to street, David's, my contractions were 5 minutes apart, sharp and relentless, and I was gripping the armrest so hard I thought I might break it. My mom met us in the lobby. She took one look at me and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like lavender and home. "You've got this," she said, and I believed her. Labor was 14 hours. 14 hours of pain that rewrote my understanding of what my body could endure, of breathing through contractions that felt like my spine was being split in half, of Harper feeding me ice chips and my mom holding my hand and telling me stories about when I was born, how she'd done this alone in a San Antonio hospital, with no one but a nurse she'd never met. "You're stronger than you know," she said, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. "You always have been." I wanted to believe her, but by hour 10, I wasn't sure. I was so tired. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, something primal and unstoppable that was pulling Owen into the world whether I was ready or not. But Harper was there, holding my other hand, her voice steady and sure. "You're almost there, Addie. You're doing this. You're bringing him home." And then at 6:37 on the morning of August 12th, Owen Michael Walsh was born. I heard his cry before I saw him, a thin, outraged wail that cut through the exhaustion and the pain and filled the room with something I can only describe as light. The doctor placed him on my chest, this tiny, perfect human with dark hair plastered to his head and eyes that blinked up at me like he was trying to figure out where he was. I looked down at him, at his miniature fingers curled into fists, at the way his mouth opened and closed, like he was already trying to speak, and I felt something inside me click into place. Wholeness. For the first time in years, I felt whole. My mom stood beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. Harper had her phone out taking photos, her own eyes red and shining. "He's perfect," Harper whispered. "Addie, he's perfect." I couldn't speak. I just held Owen, feeling his weight against my chest, his warmth soaking into my skin, and I understood what Eleanor had meant when she wrote that legacy wasn't blood, it was dignity. Owen wasn't a Sterling. He would never carry that weight, never be defined by a name that demanded compliance and control. He was mine, and he was free. There were no flowers from the Sterling family, no phone calls, no texts, no cards in the mail. Donovan had signed away his rights, agreed to the terms, and disappeared into his new life in Dallas. Warren and Celeste had not reached out since Christmas, and I didn't expect them to now. Owen would grow up never knowing them, never hearing their voices, never sitting at their table. And I was okay with that, more than okay. Because he would know my mom, who flew in from San Antonio and stayed for 2 weeks to help me learn how to change diapers and soothe a crying baby at 3 a.m. He would know Harper, who showed up every day with coffee and meals and a calm, unshakable presence that made me feel like I could do this. And he would know Trevor. Trevor came to visit on the second day. He knocked quietly, poked his head into the room, and grinned when he saw Owen asleep in my arms. "He looks like you," Trevor said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "Same stubborn chin." I laughed, exhausted and grateful. "Thanks for coming." Trevor looked at Owen for a long moment, his expression soft. "My mom would have loved him," he said quietly. "She would have loved you, too. You're exactly the kind of person Eleanor hoped would be here." I felt tears prick my eyes. I wish I could have met her. "You did," Trevor said. "In a way. She left you that trust, that letter. She saw what this family was, and she fought back the only way she could. You're finishing what she started." I looked down at Owen, at his tiny face, and I made a promise. I would raise him the way Eleanor had hoped, with dignity, with kindness, with the knowledge that he didn't owe anyone his silence or his compliance, that he was enough exactly as he was. We went home 3 days later, not to the house I'd shared with Donovan, but to the house I'd built for us. The Clarksville house with the sage green nursery and the rocking chair my mom had sent, and the shelves full of books I couldn't wait to read to Owen. Harper drove us, my mom in the passenger seat, Owen strapped into his car seat in the back beside me. I kept reaching over to touch his hand to make sure he was real, that this wasn't a dream I'd wake up from. When we pulled into the driveway, I looked at the house, my house, and felt something settle in my chest. This was home, not because of the walls or the furniture or the address, but because it was ours, Owen's and mine. A place where he would be safe, loved, and free to become whoever he wanted to be. And as I carried him inside his tiny body, warm against my chest, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. Motherhood was harder and better than I'd imagined. The first month was a blur of sleepless nights and 2 a.m. feedings, of learning to decipher Owen's cries and wondering if I was doing any of it right. There were moments at 3 a.m. with him screaming in my arms when I felt like I was drowning. But then he'd quiet his tiny hand curling around my finger, and I'd look down at his face and feel something settle in my chest. Love. Not the complicated conditional love I'd learned in my marriage, but something simpler and fiercer. The kind that didn't ask anything in return. By October, we'd found a rhythm. Owen smiled for the first time on a gray Tuesday morning, a gummy, lopsided grin that made me cry, and after that, the world felt less overwhelming. I started taking on part-time design work, again small projects I could manage from home, while Owen napped. The financial security from the settlement and Eleanor's trust meant I could choose my hours and prioritize being Owen's mom. Harper came over every Sunday with coffee and bagels, holding Owen while I showered or answered emails. She'd become his godmother in every way that mattered. Trevor visited less often, but when he did, he brought books and stuffed animals Owen immediately tried to eat. My mom flew in once a month from San Antonio, cooking meals and doing laundry, and reminding me I was doing well. December came, and with it, Owen's first Christmas. I thought about last year, the Sterling estate, the recording the moment I'd walked out and never looked back. This year, Christmas was quiet. Just me, Owen, Harper, Trevor, and my mom in the Clarksville house, the tree small and slightly crooked. Owen was 4 months old, too young to understand, but I held him on my lap while we opened gifts and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. We were building our own traditions now. By February, Owen was sitting up with support and laughing a deep belly laugh that erupted whenever Trevor made funny faces. I'd started teaching him even though he was too young to understand. Every night after his bath, I'd hold him close and whisper the same words. You are enough, Owen, just as you are. Your value doesn't come from what you achieve. It comes from the fact that you exist and you are loved. He'd blink up at me with those dark eyes, and I'd know he didn't understand the words, but maybe someday he would remember the feeling. In late February, I received an invitation to the Sterling Properties annual gala. Gerald Tucker had taken over as CEO, and the invitation was polite, professional, and olive branch. I held it for a long moment, then set it down. When Harper came over that Sunday, she picked it up. Are you going to go? I shook my head. I don't owe them anything. Not my time, not my presence, not even closure. I've already moved on. Harper smiled. Good. March arrived warm and bright. On a Saturday afternoon, I packed a picnic basket and drove to Zilker Park with Owen. Harper and Trevor met us there, spreading a blanket under a live oak near the creek. The bluebonnets were just starting to bloom, patches of purple and blue dotting the green hills. Families filled the park, kids running, dogs chasing frisbees, couples lying in the sun. I set Owen on the blanket, and he immediately grabbed a fistful of grass. Harper laughed and gently pried it from his fingers. He's fearless, she said, just like his mom. I looked around at the three of them, Harper, who'd stood by me when I had nothing, Trevor, who'd testified against his own family, and my mom, who'd flown in that morning just to spend the weekend with us. This was my family, not the one I'd been born into, and certainly not the one I'd married into, but the one I'd built piece by piece from love and loyalty and choice. Owen reached for a dandelion, his fingers closing around the stem, and I felt contentment settle over me. Not wholeness, I'd found that when he was born. This was something else. The knowledge that I didn't need to keep searching for what I already had. Trevor stretched out on the blanket and looked up at the sky. You know what Eleanor would say if she could see this? I glanced at him. What? She'd say you did it. You broke the cycle. I thought about that. About Warren and his need to control, about Donovan and his cruelty, about the generations of Sterling men who'd measured their worth in power and legacy. And I thought about Owen, who would grow up knowing none of that, who would learn that kindness mattered more than wealth, that dignity came from how you treated people, who would never sit at a table where his voice was silenced. Trevor was right. I had broken the cycle. The sun dipped lower, and Owen started to fuss. I picked him up, settling him against my chest, and he quieted immediately. Harper started packing up the basket. My mom folded the blanket. Trevor stood and brushed grass from his jeans, and I stood there for a moment holding my son, surrounded by the people who'd chosen me, just as I'd chosen them. This was my life now. Not the one I'd imagined when I met Donovan 6 years ago. Not the one Warren and Celeste had tried to shape me into, but mine. Built on my terms, filled with people who loved me for who I was not, who they needed me to be. And it was perfect. Looking back at my story, I want to share something with you. When I was trapped in that marriage, I thought silence would keep me safe. I thought shrinking myself would earn love. I was wrong. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's cruelty because you trusted them with your whole heart. Family betrayal doesn't announce itself. It hides behind smiles and holiday dinners and promises that turn to ash. And when you finally see it, when you finally understand that family betrayal has been happening all along, the anger you feel can consume you. But here's what I learned. Family revenge isn't about destruction. Real family revenge is rebuilding your life so beautifully that their toxicity can't touch you anymore. The best family revenge is peace, the kind they said you'd never find without them. Don't be like I was. Don't wait years to trust your gut. Don't ignore the red flags because you're afraid of being alone. And don't ever believe that your worth is tied to someone else's approval. God gives us instincts for a reason. Listen to them. Your dignity is not negotiable. My advice, choose your family. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and love shouldn't cost you your soul. Build a life that reflects your values, not their expectations. And remember, you owe abusers nothing. Not silence, not forgiveness, not a second chance. If my story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Your story matters too.